a teenage film snob, baby. I was a teenage film snob, baby.
Welcome to I Was a Teenage Film Snob. I'm James Chalmers, your friendly neighbourhood film snob, and I am back live from the treadmill with another solo show. A few things have happened recently that I wanted to share on the podcast, so we'll have a bit of a chat about that. And I also want to talk about Spider-Man Brand New Day. We went to the premiere for that. I've already put my review online, but I'll talk spoilers for those of you who have seen it. But before we dive into that, the main purpose of this episode is to provide a follow-up to a video I posted on the Instagram page. So if you don't follow us on Instagram, that's where most of our news is. That's where most of our content is. And we get a lot more traffic through than to the podcast. So it's kind of fun to see when things kind of catch fire and stuff like that. And last week I put up a video, just a very, not a baited video, but definitely one to inspire conversation. It was around red flags. And the reason I posted it is a couple of weeks ago, someone posted a video about the movie Red Flags, basically saying that if you watch this movie, it's a red flag and don't talk to me. And I thought it was an interesting concept at first because they definitely put in some controversial films, some banned films, some highly censored films. But then they also put in things like Harry Potter and stuff like that. And whilst I understand there's controversy around it now, I don't think watching the film is a red flag. So my video said that if you watch the following films, it's a red flag. And there were no videos at all. And that's because I don't think watching a movie is a red flag, no matter what it is. And I will say I probably chose the wrong word. I think I said if you enjoy this film, it's a red flag, and then was joking. Sorry, I stopped my recording by mistake, and I don't know how to fix it when I'm using my phone. I think the wording I chose was not quite right. I said if you enjoy this movie, it's a red flag, and then said enjoying movies isn't a red flag. And maybe what I should have said was watching movies of any type is not a red flag. Because if you enjoy certain films, I suppose that is concerning. But the greater point I was trying to make is, first of all, don't make people feel bad for enjoying things that you don't like. My biggest pet peeve, and the thing that bums me out the most on the internet, is how quickly people are in the comments to tell you that your opinion sucks. And someone was very much like, well, if you don't like it, then that's a you problem. Yeah, it is a me problem. But also, I don't go out of my way to make people feel bad about themselves. I don't go out of my way to make people feel bad for liking something, even if I didn't like it. I think that's shitty behavior. So I'm calling it out. Maybe it is a me problem, but maybe we could all just be nicer to each other as well. So that's the first thing. The other reason I wanted to talk about is I wanted to start a conversation because a lot of people are like, if you watch this movie, it's a red flag, it's a bad movie, and it's an evil movie and all this sort of stuff. And I disagree with that. There are some films on a list that I'm going to go through that, were probably created by someone who's not that great. In fact, there's definitely some. But I argue that you can't blame a movie for someone's behavior. If I watch Halloween and then pick up a butcher's knife and stab someone, it's not Halloween's fault. There's something fundamentally wrong with me. And me blaming the movie is a refusal to take accountability of my actions. And that's what I was trying to get at. But people love to just comment and stuff. So what I did was I wrote down the list of every single movie that people called a red flag, and we're going to talk about them. Every single movie, we're going to talk about whether it's a red flag or not, why it could be perceived as a red flag, and I will explain my reason as to why it's not a red flag. So, the first movie that someone commented was Biodome with Pauly Shore. Now, I think it was a bit of a joke. I was talking to the guy about it later. He said he really enjoyed the conversation, and he just said there's nothing about that movie that he enjoys. That's fine. That doesn't make it a red flag. You will not like everything that your friends watch and vice versa. Not a red flag. He called out that some of the jokes had aged poorly and were not politically correct. And I said, that's fine. That's the problem with movies, especially comedies, is the older they get, society changes. But it doesn't make it a red flag. If someone uses the R word, or, I've just rewatched Blazing Saddles where they use racial slurs. I don't think watching Blazing Saddles is a red flag. I know that I'm not going to watch that movie and then start using that word. I'm not. But to be fair, I think the guy didn't like Pauly Shore and was just trying to make a point. But again, that's an easy one to defend. The next one, and this one came up a ton, was a movie called A Serbian Film, which if you've listened to my interview with Sensory Stowers last year, you'll know we talked about it in quite a bit of detail. And I said to her, and I said this in the comments as well, I've never seen it. I have no interest in seeing it. It's not my jam. I can tell it's not my jam. Like, I know the content of it. I've researched it enough to know that I will get nothing out of this movie. I also said, I've never lived in a country under fascism. I've never felt the need to rebel so much that I would create a piece of art or a piece of film. Let's be honest, all films are art, whether you like them or not. Art challenges people. Art is going to upset people, and art is going to, test you and in different sorts of ways. But it's a way of rebelling, and art is always political. Given that I've never lived under the circumstances that the director had, I don't think I'm fair to decide whether it's appropriate or not. Like, I haven't lived the life that person has. Am I going to watch it? No. Do I like what it's about? No. But that's the other thing. I think it's important to remember that not everything is meant to be enjoyed. Some films are designed to make you uncomfortable. If we talk about Obsession, which came out earlier this year, like, I don't think it's an enjoyable film. Like, the hero of that film is not a hero at all. I guess the hero is technically her, but we never really get to see much of her. Like, once the wish is made, we never get to see much more of her again. And when we do, it's never in a pleasant light. So films aren't always meant to be enjoyed. They can do other things. So whilst I wouldn't, watch it myself, I don't think it's a red flag. And if someone watched that and then decided to reenact it, I can't stress this enough. I think there's something fundamentally wrong with the person who sees that movie and thinks it's an instruction manual. Like, that's not the movie's fault. Anyway, then we had Cannibal Holocaust. Cannibal Holocaust I have seen. So the first three films, I've finally seen one of them. Someone did say that these red flag films and these controversial films are often people trying to be edgy, trying to see, show off what they can do. I will cop to this. I watched Cannibal Holocaust in my 20s because I was trying to see how much I could tolerate, and I did think it was edgy. I was like, oh yeah, I've seen a controversial film. Until I watched it. And then I really regretted watching it. I own it because I own most of my media, but I don't think I'll ever watch it again. I cannot agree with the use of animal violence in that film. There's no reason for it. But I know the director was trying to make a statement. He was trying to do something that people hadn't done before. He wanted to make a horror film so realistic that people thought it was real. And that, for better or worse, is an art project. That's an installation. That is trying to pull the wool over the eyes of the audience. It's him, it's Orson Welles, with, what did he do? With War of the Worlds. Like, it's all of that. H.G. Wells, not Orson Welles. H.G. Wells with War of the Worlds. Like, that's what he's trying to do. And his methods were cruel and despicable, and no animal should have had to suffer. But I do know the animals were killed by a real Amazon tribe and they were consumed. So they were killed and consumed the way they would have been if the camera wasn't rolling. Doesn't make it right because it's been used as entertainment as opposed to, living. But at the same time, it's neither here nor there. Like, they shouldn't have done. But I never hear people complain about Friday the 13th. The first Friday the 13th movie, they cut a snake in half and no one ever talks about it. So, anyway. But again, not a red flag to me. If you try to reenact it, something wrong with you. Then we had Terrifier. Terrifier came up quite a bit. And now, I know in recent news there have been things going on behind the scenes. Catherine Corcoran had talked about how she hadn't been paid correctly, how there was some treatment on set. We've only really heard her statement. I haven't heard anything from the filmmakers and stuff like that. And that's not me saying we need to. Like, I believe women, and if she says it happened, then it did happen. I believe it did happen. But separating that from it and just talking about the movie, it's a slasher film. And it's a violent slasher film. And it's intense and it's gross. And Art the Clown is one of the most despicable villains on screen. But it is just a movie. It's disappointing the way she was treated and what she's endured. It's frustrating. But people watch The Crow all the time. They revere The Crow. No one lashes out against the film The Crow, even though Brandon Lee was murdered on set. It's part of his legacy. And that's something else that I was trying to talk about, is there's a double standard. And I'm not saying you should watch, Terrifier because at least she didn't die. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, if you're going to make up rules about film and art and watching them, then you got to follow all of them. There's a film later on the list where they talk about a director being a predator, and they said you shouldn't watch anything a predator creates, and I understand that. But if you're going to follow that rule has to apply to everything. So if you don't want to watch a film with a predator, and I don't mean the sci-fi character, I mean an actual, despicable human predator, then you shouldn't watch anything involving predators. So you shouldn't watch School of Rock because it has a Led Zeppelin song and the guys in Led Zeppelin definitely slept with underage girls. That's predatory behavior. Now, you might think I'm being extreme, but the rule has to apply to all. You can't pick and choose your rules. If you're not going to watch this movie because the guy was a predator, you shouldn't watch any movies where the guy was a predator. That's one option. The second option, of course, is to try and separate art from artists, which is really hard to do. And it's a moral grey area, and it's something that we all have to reconcile with as consumers. But I think to try and rule out everything that has been touched by someone who's a bad person, well, doesn't leave a lot of room for art in the world. And these are just my thoughts. And of course, you can disagree. This is not me saying, hey, this is the way it's going to be. I just saying this is kind of what I'm thinking. Next, we had a few films that I haven't seen. One was Cuties. That one came up a lot. I don't know much about it, but apparently it highly sexualizes underage children. Now, I haven't watched the film, so I can't really comment on that. I have to imagine that the filmmaker had a reason for doing this. They were trying to say something. But yeah, that's a tough one to defend, I'll be honest. That one is tough to defend. And especially because if there is an audience of predatory people out there, it does feel a lot like it's potentially attracting that audience. So if you enjoy that movie, yeah, okay, that might be a bit of a red flag for sure. Emilia Perez was mentioned. I don't know it was mentioned with a couple of other movies, so I don't know whether it was mentioned because it's a bad movie that people don't like. If I don't really know why it was mentioned. I think they were just saying because it's not a very good movie. But Emilia Perez to me isn't a red flag movie. She-Hulk was mentioned by the same person again. There's no red flags in She-Hulk. It's fine. Citizen Vigilante, I believe, was mentioned because it stars Armie Hammer, and Armie Hammer, of course, had some controversy a few years ago. It was also directed by Uwe Boll, who's a bit of an unusual character, for sure. I don't know whether it's a red flag. World War Z was mentioned, and I think, in fact, there's a few. World War Z was mentioned, Last Airbender was mentioned, Wuthering Heights was mentioned, Tron Legacy was mentioned, Son of the Mask was mentioned. I think these are all people just having a bit of fun with it, and just saying, I wouldn't, if you're watching that, don't be my friend. Fair enough. This next one's really interesting, and I do think it is a red flag, and the film is Melania, which is the documentary that came out earlier this year about Trump's wife. I will admit there probably is some red flag. There is a bit of a red flag, and the reason I'm going to secede to this is I don't think it's a movie. I think it's propaganda. Propaganda is different. Propaganda, is a film being made by someone with an agenda trying to force their ideals onto you. That's a red flag. I'm okay with that one. I'll secede to that one. But I also said in the comments, I don't think that's really a movie. Someone says Stan Helsing as a joke, obviously. The next one came up a lot. And this is a really tricky one. It's a dicey one to talk about, but I'm going to do my best. And the film was Birth of a Nation. Now, if you're not familiar with Birth of a Nation, it was directed by D.W. Griffiths in the early 1900s about the kind of birth of America. And it's a film that condones the actions of the Ku Klux Klan. They're played as heroes in this film. Obviously, upon first glance, that is problematic. In fact, not even first glance. It is problematic. And it does fall very close under the banner of propaganda. However, and I would extend this potentially, well, maybe not Melania, Birth of a Nation, whether we like it or not, is part of history. It's part of film history, and it's part of the collective American experience in history as well. And to remove a film or ignore a film because it has things that we don't agree with, we're kind of doomed to repeat our mistakes. We can't cover up history just because we find it unpleasant or uncomfortable. If you watch Birth of a Nation and you agree with it, that is a concern. But what I did say to the first person who commented about this was, I don't think the average teenage skinhead kid is becoming racist because of Birth of a Nation. It's made in 1916. Kids can't even stare at a phone for more than 3 seconds before swiping. If anything, they're probably finding Birth of a Nation after already making some decisions, some very bad decisions. I think Birth of a Nation is found by film historians, people who study film, and the racists who are finding it were already racist and already down a dark path, and again, had something fundamentally wrong with them. I'm okay to be wrong with this, and people can tell me I'm wrong, but I do genuinely think that and that's why I wanted to change the wording. Watching Birth of a Nation as a historical document, whether you're learning more about film, or you're just interested in the dark history of America, I think there's something, it's okay to watch a film, but if you walk out of that movie and you're like, oh yeah, that's the way I want to live my life, then it's a red flag, yes. But I think simply watching it is okay. And I'll be honest, I have seen bits of it. I didn't seek it out, but when I studied film, because we were looking at the birth of film and the origins of the moving picture and stuff like that, we saw parts of Birth of a Nation because it's one of the first movies ever made. Whether you agree with it, and hopefully you don't, or not. So yeah, I've seen bits of it, not by choice. My teacher showed it to me. I don't think she was racist. She loved everything about movies. But it is a very controversial film, and I understand why it was brought up. But I don't think simply watching it makes it a red flag. This next one also came up, Salo, The 120 Days of Sodom, another movie I've seen, directed by Pier Paolo Pasolini. And this was a film made kind of in response to dictatorship and fascism in Italy. And it's an incredibly unpleasant movie. There's lots of abuse in there. There's lots of consumption of bodily fluids and matter. And it is not for the faint-hearted. There's lots of abuse in there. I will say, by all accounts and the research I've done, that everyone involved in the film had a really good time making it because they were just goofing off on set and stuff like that when the cameras weren't rolling. And again, I think it's an act of rebellion. It's an act of art. It's protest. It's to, say we've had enough. We're fed up. We're going to, tell the story like it is. And this is what we think of you, you fascists. This is what you do. Like, you make people eat their own poo and stuff like that. So again, I think it falls under the same banner of a Serbian film and things like that. And it's like the message, I'm going to just keep repeating the same message. If you watch it, I think that's fine. If you enjoy it and think this is a lifestyle choice for me, that's when it's a red flag. But again, it's another example of a film that's not supposed to be enjoyed. Next, we have Tusk, and I was really surprised by this one. I know a lot of people don't like Tusk, but it was made by Kevin Smith, who is an incredibly liberal, left-leaning filmmaker. He's always been on the precipice of freedom of speech, if you go all the way back to Clerks. And obviously I'm biased because I'm a Kevin Smith fan. I won't pretend that I'm not. But he's always made films for the sake of entertaining, and he's always been a mouthpiece for the left and has been very liberal. And even though some films like Chasing Amy maybe haven't aged as well, it was always coming from a place of innocence and purity and trying to give people a voice and stuff like that. Tusk was him being like, I want to make a messed up horror film. I want to make a body horror film. That's not a red flag to me. I think it's entirely a very entertaining piece of cinema. It is not for everyone, but it's not a red flag. Speaking of body horror, next up is The Human Centipede. And people only mentioned the first one. I'll talk about the whole trilogy. I don't find the first one to be a red flag. The first one was a what-if situation. Director Tom Six was sitting around with his friends, and he said, what is the most appropriate punishment for child predators? And they came up with the concept of The Human Centipede. And he goes, oh, that'd be a good horror film, actually. And I think it is, like it's meant to be a Frankenstein movie. It's about a doctor sewing people together. Like, it's just grosser. But the first film actually isn't even that bad. Like, obviously the idea of it is bad and it's confronting and it's gross, but they don't show too much. So I think watching that, it's meant to be a 21st century Frankenstein film. Whether I agree with that, whether I say, like, is it the same caliber as, like, Boris Karloff's Frankenstein? No, of course not. But it's the same idea. Like, that's what they're doing. 2 and 3 I have a harder time defending, particularly 2. 2 is pure exploitation. Although, there's room in the filmic landscape for exploitation films as well. You don't have to be a fan of them, but it doesn't make you a bad person because you watched exploitation films. Particularly if you're a Tarantino fan, because Tarantino, all of his stuff comes heavily rooted in exploitation. The next movie on the list was Freddy Got Fingered. Now, I haven't seen Freddy Got Fingered in a long time. I recently watched the Tom Green documentary, and it was very much all about him trying to push the envelope in comedy and do different things and challenge audiences. And he had a huge following on his show, and the movie is just basically taking the idea of what he put on his show and blowing it up on the big screen, and people didn't quite connect with it. It's silly, it's outrageous, it's offensive, but not a red flag. Just not for everyone. White Chicks was also thrown up there. I haven't seen White Chicks in a long time. I don't know if they were kidding. I'd love to know why people think it's a red flag. If it's the idea of 2 black men in whiteface, I don't think that's offensive. Like, I think, takes a lot, I think the white, Caucasian people can take quite a beating before it becomes offensive, given their treatment of other races for the, all of human history. If it's the fact that it's men dressing up like women and it's potentially offensive to the trans community, I understand that argument. But again, I don't think it's a red flag. I think it's a product of its time, and we look at it now and say, look, we wouldn't do it again. We realize we can't condone this. But at its time, this is something that was considered acceptable. Whether it truly is or not, we probably shouldn't do that for the sake of a laugh or a cheap laugh. But I don't think it's a red flag. Clown House is another movie that came up. Apparently, there was someone on the set involved in criminal activities. I haven't had a chance to read up on that yet. Obviously, if someone is harming people, that's a red flag. But I would also say, if you watch that film not knowing it, it's a little bit different. Brett Ratner is on this list as well. They said anything by Brett Ratner. Now, obviously, Brett Ratner has had a troubled and problematic past in Hollywood, and he's guilty of doing a lot of things. But I think it's really important to remember as well, like, not everyone who watches films pays attention to what's going on in them if they're not inside the film community. Like, my parents probably couldn't even tell you who Brett Ratner is. But if my mum went to the video store and hired Superman Returns and put it on for me, and I loved it as a kid and I didn't know who he was and she loved it, that's not problematic. That's not a red flag. Like, you also have to expect that some people won't know all the history. And then if they get educated and they make the decision to stop watching it, then that's fine. But I think, it's not ignorance if it's not on your... Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to use ignorance as an excuse, but I think also, like, there is a level of, some people don't even... I don't know. But I don't think it's a problem. I think, supporting Brett... And again, this comes to separating art from artist again. Like, if you're going to stop watching Brett Ratner films, you have to stop watching Polanski films, so no more Rosemary's Baby. You have to stop watching Woody Allen, and that's fine. And look, and if you're the kind of person who can do that, that's fine. That's great. Look, you're better than all of us if you can do that. But I also think that people should be allowed to enjoy or watch the art that they like, especially if they watch it when they're children. Like, if you look at all the stuff you enjoyed as a child and then come back now as an adult, like, you'll be so disappointed in everything you read. Like, Enid Blyton made some pretty controversial stuff going back. Roald Dahl had some pretty controversial opinions. So, like, you have a choice. You either cut it all from your life or you learn to accept the fact that the art and the artist are two different things. What else is on here? Jeepers Creepers came up. I already tried to touch on this. The director obviously convicted of some pretty heinous crimes. Most of the horror community still likes that movie, and it's because they're separating art from artist. Ilsa, She-Wolf, the SS. Exploitation film, it falls under that banner. Like, yes, there's despicable things in there, but it's not real. It is a film. It's escapism, and I'll talk about that at the end. Necromantic, someone wrote down. I've watched both Necromantic films this year. They're not enjoyable at all. They're really disgusting and deplorable. But I would also say they were protest films. The director of the Necromantic films was sick of the ongoing and increasing censorship in Germany. He was saying that everything was being censored and there was no freedom of speech, and it was getting very close to something dangerous happening in Germany that happened once before. And so he made these as protest films. He goes, if you're going to censor everything we say, then I'm going to make the most heavily censored film I can. This is what I'm going to do. So there's a reason behind it. You're not meant to enjoy. You're meant to be like it's meant to prove a point. If this something this bad can get made, then maybe the stuff we are censoring isn't so bad. Glitter by Mariah Carey. I think someone was being a bit silly there. Brett Ratner we talked about. Hangover 2 and Movie 43 again. I think someone just, not liking movies. Megan is Missing is an interesting one. It's the story of an abducted child, and it's quite cruel. I haven't seen this one myself. I don't plan on watching it. The subject matter is not for me. But again, like telling a very important story about the safety of children, how we can protect our neighbors and stuff like that. If you want to watch it, I think you should be allowed to watch it. It's not a red flag. Martyrs came up. The whole French wave of extreme cinema is incredibly brutal. I've talked about it a little bit on the Instagram page before. Again, not a film that's meant to be enjoyed, a film that's meant to be experienced to make you feel things. Joker 2 came up. I think that was a joke. And Catwoman came up as well. Also, just a bad movie. So those are the red flag films. And I guess like what I've been trying to say, and I keep saying, and I will continue to say it, is that I don't think any one particular film is a red flag. I think Milani is a really good example because it's not a film, it's propaganda. As for Cuties and Emilia Perez and a couple others, I do need to do a bit more reading before I make my own opinion there. But all in all, most of these films are just from genres that are pushing the envelope, trying to challenge the norms of art. I watched Visitor Q recently, Takashi Miike's film. I'd seen it once before. I hadn't seen it in a while. I'd forgotten about it, and then I bought it and watched it again. And after I finished watching it, I felt really uncomfortable. I felt really kind of gross, and I wondered why I had it in my collection, and I kind of regretted it a little bit. But then before I turned it off, I watched a commentary. It wasn't a full feature commentary, but just like a 5-10 minute commentary by this guy called Andrew Levin, who's an Australian kind of film critic. And he talked about the importance of glass breakers, brick throwers. And he said, the film landscape needs to evolve or it dies. And you need your brick throwers, you need your glass breakers, guys who are going to come in, girls who are going to come in and create something incredibly challenging that sticks with you. And not everyone is going to enjoy it and not everyone's going to watch it, but for those who are paying attention, it will make waves or make ripples. And it's important. You get that in art as well, in all forms of art. We need to see it over and over again so that it doesn't become stale. It doesn't mean you have to enjoy it. And that's the moral, is you can choose not to watch these movies. Not everyone is going to watch Martyrs or Frontiers or High Tension. Over half the stuff in my collection, I would ask my wife never to watch. And I probably wouldn't let my kids watch either. Once they're old enough, they can make their own decision. But at the end of the day, like if we start censoring what people are watching, if we start, deeming people red flags because they choose to watch a movie, that's fascism. Like that's where we're at. So like we're starting to dictate what people can and can't do. The whole point of art is expression, and it's going to sometimes be uncomfortable because, life is uncomfortable. If you've had a cushy life, if you've had an easy life, if you haven't had too many things on, it is going to be, like anything about war or atrocities is going to be incredibly uncomfortable, as it should be. But it doesn't make it any less valid as art. Like we do have to accept the fact that we are going to see some things on screen that we don't like. I heard a story a couple of years ago before before Love and Thunder came out. For Thor, Love and Thunder, I can't say the words. And audiences were demanding there be a trigger warning put before the film because Jane Foster has cancer. Now, I understand that cancer is a nasty disease. Thankfully, I've never really had to endure it myself, and no one in my family's had to endure it. And if we ever have to, I understand it's going to be very challenging and heartbreaking and horrible. And I'm not trying to diminish the impact of a disease like that at all. I'm not. But cancer is going to happen whether it's in Thor: Love and Thunder or not. It's a part of life. People are going to get it. Disease is part of life. Sickness is part of life. Murder, unfortunately, is part of life. What's really interesting is a lot of people, spend all this time kind of criticizing movies, but they won't criticize the actions of their family and friends when they do the wrong thing. Red flags exist in the real world. That's the red flag. If you treat someone poorly, that's a red flag. If you allow people to behave badly and treat other people badly and say nothing, that's a red flag. Movies aren't a red flag, unless they're propaganda or created with the desire to hurt and harm people, of course. But even if they are designed to hurt or harm people, like Birth of a Nation, like I've forgotten the World War II one. There's another one. It's a Nazi one. There's a Nazi one from World War II. I can't remember what it is. Obviously designed to hurt, harm, and make people feel uncomfortable. And I do think they are red flags if you watch them and see them as life lessons. But I think the decision to erase history and pretend it didn't happen is far more damaging. As humanity, we need to move forward, accept the mistakes of our past, that they are part of our past, and just try to be better each day. I know this is a heavier subject matter than usual for the podcast, and I'm sure despite, 22,000 people watched that video, and thank you, oh my God, like how amazing. I know that many people are not going to listen to this, and I guarantee most people, maybe every person who commented on that post is not going to listen to this podcast, and that's fine. But I think, when we talk about censorship and we talk about telling people what they can and can't do, it becomes a dicey and dangerous subject. And I went through that list. There are plenty of films on that list I've never seen and plenty that I wouldn't want to see. But if you choose to unearth the dark side of humanity in a controlled and safe environment, you should be allowed to do so. And that's the final point I want to make, is that it comes back to what we've been talking about when we talk about horror on the podcast, which is I don't want to be scared in real life. I don't want to know what it's like. I don't want to experience being chased by someone with a gun or a knife. But I'll watch it in a movie because it's a controlled sense of fear. I don't want to be involved in or experience despicable acts. But part of understanding the human condition is seeing all sides of it. And cinema provides that. It provides a controlled environment that is safe. It has a pause button. It has an off button. And you are allowed to see what it's all about. And if you want to stop at any point, you can. And as long as it's not harming people or damaging them, the people on set, the people involved, then it's okay. But at the end of the day, you have to make a decision for yourself whether you want to go down that rabbit hole or not. And if you don't want to, that's fine. You don't have to. I've gone down some rabbit holes and there are others I'll steer clear of. And that's my decision. Anyway, I was going to talk about Spider-Man Brand New Day, but it feels a bit strange to talk about after all that. So I think maybe I'll leave it there. And then when I'm back on the show with Nick, actually, I can tease it. Is it next week? No, it's not. Jenna Beth Gunter from a previous episode and Real Talk with Jenna Beth is coming back on the podcast, and we're going to talk about Marvel films. So I'll save my Spider-Man talk for there. Anyway, that's going to do it for this week's episode. Hopefully you dug it. I'm not trying to offend or trigger people with an episode like this, but if we are going to start having these serious conversations, we need somewhere safe to do it, and this podcast is as good as any to do that. So thank you for listening. Let me know your thoughts. Be respectful and kind. And I will talk to you all next time. Thanks for listening, guys.